Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us again this morning on Thursday. My name's Paul Healey. I'm the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Principals Association. If this is your first time joining us, we've been doing these Thursday thought webinars for about the last 5 or 6 weeks, where we bring you some updated information from what's happening in relationship to the issues around COVID-19, and then an opportunity to get some of your questions answered by other principals that are on the call. Usually we have a panel of principals. This week, since we didn't have a huge response to the initial topic, we decided just to do an open forum, and I'll kind of explain that in a minute as we proceed. I also wanted to let people know, because we're going to be involved in a huge project here, that this will probably be our last scheduled Thursday webinar where we have panelists, but we'll continue to do updates and a recorded webinar going forward, and they will be listed on our website, as well as we'll send an email out to our members when we're updating any information. So the first thing I really want to talk about today, as I mentioned last week, is this special task force that's being put together by all of the educational organizations in cooperation, and it's called the Back to School 2020 Task Force. As most of you know, we're still really unsure about what's going to happen in the fall in specific regions or counties across the state, waiting for some additional guidance on what a school will look like in the fall. So we decided we didn't want to wait for that, and all of our organizations have decided to put a task force together. Last week, I explained the task force and asked for volunteers on the special committees. We were overwhelmed with volunteerism, so thank you all very much. We only had a few certain slots to put people in each category, so we had to turn some people away, but everybody will be getting that information sooner or later. I did just want to mention the specific areas of the task force that will be addressed during the month of May, and these people will be getting together by a way of Zoom. So here are the areas that will be addressed: facility and logistics, staffing and personnel, the instruction piece, transportation, special education, extracurriculars, health and safety, communication, outreach, resources, and community. And each educational organization has also decided that they will have some coordinators taking each one of these areas. For the Pennsylvania Principals Association, we are going to be coordinating the instructional subgroup as well as the extracurricular subgroup. And again, I want to thank everybody for submitting their names for consideration for volunteering on these subgroups, and we're looking forward to some type of a report to come out in mid-June in reference to the questions that will come up for these subgroups and some guidance that we would like to put forward on that. So stay tuned for that. And the only other thing I wanted to mention before we open up the forum today is, as all of this is going on with COVID-19, as you well know, we also have a state budget that needs to be adopted. And the information that we're getting on the state budget is twofold at this point. There is some people, legislators, talking about a 12-month budget like we usually have. And then the second idea that's being floated around right now is a two-part phase-in budget, meaning they would adopt a budget for the first 6 months of the fiscal year and then do another budget for the second 6 months. So we're following that idea very, very carefully, because as you know, as school districts, we need to adopt our budgets in June, and we can't go back and reopen our budgets 6 months later, depending on, shortfall of revenue or anything else that happens. So again, we're certainly not in favor of a phased-in budget unless we can be assured that the revenue would be there to help our school districts going forward. And talking about the budget, we also know, as I mentioned last week, that many districts are going to be in a pinch with next year's budget. And that is a result of COVID-19, as well as lost income revenue, property taxes maybe being extended, as well as, house sales and home sales and all of that type of stuff that will be happening. And any, by the way, pension increases, as well as our other mandated costs. So we know that school districts are hurting right now. We're following that situation very carefully. And together with our educational organizations, we'll be pushing some information out to the legislators about making sure that education is fully funded for the 2021 school year. Okay, so today, what we'd like to do is to basically, anyone that's on the call, if you have a question today, is to put it in the chat room, and we'll say what the question is. And then if you can speak to that question, we ask you to raise your hand. We will then unmute you and let you talk in response to that. So it's questions from the field today. So again, put them in the chat room so that everyone can see them. Stephanie will read the question. If you would like to respond to that or have something to share in reference to that idea that's posted, please raise your hand and we'll let you talk. So I'm going to do the first question that I received a little bit later, and earlier this week, and that question had to do with elementary report cards. We've had a lot of information about secondary report cards in the past, where high schools are using the first 3 marking periods and either doing a pass-fail for the 4th marking period and some other ideas. So we have explored that issue, but we haven't explored the elementary one. And one of our members was asking, has anybody made any determination on what you're doing about report cards at the elementary level? And if anybody can respond to that, if you can just raise your hand, and we'll turn it over to you to share some thoughts on elementary report cards right now. Okay, so we're going to go to who's first?
Deborah Barnes.
Deborah, go ahead.
Hi. So what we have decided to do was, we have a standards-based report card. So each grade level is going through the standards that are listed on the report card and determining which areas they have adequate evidence to provide some feedback to students. And so we'll provide a rating on those standards that the teachers in that grade level feel like during this closure they've been able to instruct and assess well enough to provide some semblance of valid feedback. We are going to put a disclaimer on our report card that, just reminds the audience, whomever's reading the report card, that the conditions under which that instruction occurred. And then we're also going to add a more robust narrative piece rather than just our usual comments for some teachers who feel like the ratings will not really reflect the full scope of what the child did during that school year. So it's certainly not a perfect system, and some grade levels only have 1 or 2 standards that they feel like they can, justifiably report on, but that's what we've decided to do.
And Deborah, can you share what district you're from in case people want to reach out to you a little bit later after the call?
Sure, I'm from Kutztown Area School District.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's go to Stacy next. Stacy? Stacy, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So sorry about that. I was talking. It's just, this is Doug Dickerson. Sorry, I'm on my wife's Zoom account.
Oh, okay.
So my apologies. So we're going to do something very similar. We're doing a pass-fail though. with that for the fourth quarter and kind of logging what we're covering in this so we can have a kind of a better plan to beef up in the fall when we're coming back. So this whole quarter, based off assignments of completion and correctness, they'll be given a pass or fail for the week. And then obviously a cumulative of, they did a more percentage and they would get the pass or the fail. So, and I really like that idea about the disclaimer, and maybe adding more of a narrative on the report card to kind of get that out there. That's a really good idea.
Thanks, Doug. Let's go to Jessica.
Can you hear me now?
Got you now.
Okay. For our standards-based report card, I really like the ideas that were shared. We were debating, just because it's so hard, we can't really give any of the assessments that we would normally give under this environment. We were considering just graying out the fourth marking period and only doing a narrative for the report card. So we're still not sure exactly what we're doing. That's only kindergarten and first grade that have standards-based report cards. And then we're doing a complete incomplete for the fourth marking period for second through fourth grade, and that's in line with our secondary that's also doing complete incomplete, so it's the same language. And then I do really like the narrative, though, even if it's a separate piece of paper that goes in with the report card, because on those report cards there's not as much room for a narrative as there is on the standards-based report card, so I really like that idea. But in all reality, their grades were based on the first three marking periods. If they were on the verge of failing for the year, there's a little bit more weight in this fourth marking period to make that ultimate decision. And we're also possibly looking at a transitional first. We were looking at that anyway for this coming year. And now we feel like there's even more of a need because we had such a large number of kids in kindergarten that weren't ready for first grade, that if we would have had this fourth marking period in school, we probably could have gotten a large number of them ready. But because we're doing remote learning, it's more of a struggle. So that's something else. It's not really on the grading, but it goes kind of along with it because of the passing and failing the grade. So they don't necessarily need another year in kindergarten, but they're also not ready for first grade. So that's what we're thinking of doing.
And Jessica, could you remind everyone again what district you're from?
Upper Dauphin.
Yes. So Upper Dauphin, Jessica was on last week with us as well, sharing some great ideas from Upper Dauphin. Anyone else want to speak to the issue about elementary report cards before we move on? Some great ideas there. I'm doing my my wait time here. All right, so I'll pose another question that we did hear about before and see if anybody wants to comment on this. One of the issues is the whole closure issue, both at the elementary, middle, and high school. Closure meaning, how do kids get closure with this year's teacher? I know some schools are considering some different things about doing either start of the year, at the end of the year. So does anybody have any ideas on closure? How do they have closure with this year's teachers?
Janet Breaker.
Okay, we're going to go to Janet first. We'll unmute you. There's a little bit of a delay, so you have to wait till we unmute you, and we'll go to Janet first.
Good morning, everybody. I'm in the William Penn School District, and what we've talked about in leadership, nothing is definite like most things we're doing. Having, whenever we can physically, be in the same time and space, where we're actually bringing students back, we're thinking of maybe spending a half day with your original, or an hour or some period of time with your class that's this year, so that they can kind of like, what did you do over the quarantine kind of conversation and morning meeting, and then having a transition of them then going to their new teacher. Realizing that it'll be very emotional because, people are saying hello and goodbye, and then am I in the class with my best friend, or, I was 2 years ago, now I'm not. So, but we feel that it's extremely important for them to get together with this year's teacher before we move them on and have some sense of process with them. That's
Janet,
about all we've gotten to.
yeah, Janet, I'm kind of curious as your administrative team, and I know you just said you're having some preliminary talks and nothing set in stone. Are you thinking about that scenario for all 3 levels?
You mean for, in our district? No, I can't. There's, we have elementary and middle and high, and everybody's looking at it a little differently. And so I don't know that we're at unity yet, and I don't know if it will look exactly the same for high school. I know they're talking about, worst case scenario, having some kind of festivities around Thanksgiving or, the winter holidays when college kids come back. Nothing is set in stone. So I guess my thinking is a little bit more on the elementary. How do you go from your 2nd to 3rd grade teacher? Those type of things. So.
Right. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to comment on that subject? Whether you have preliminary plans or just some ideas on reference to closure for students and teachers? All right. In the meantime, any other questions on any topic, go ahead and write them in the chat room and we'll pose those at this point. I know you have questions, so don't be shy. We have a lot of expertise on the call today that can help with anything. So whether it's elementary, middle, high school, and any topic or anything for me as well.
What plans are secondary schools making for next school year? Half days, alternative days, how many periods in a day?
Okay, I hope you all heard that. Again, this is one for about secondary schools. Any plans for next school year, whether it's half day, alternating days, how many periods in a day? Anyone want to speak to that issue first? Or the issue, we just saw another one, issue on any thoughts on a staggered start for the school year, or staggered start for students. Just go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to speak to either of those. Okay, we have, is it Mike? Mike, we're gonna unmute you here and allow you to talk on that. Go ahead.
I'll be honest with you, we've been just kicking around some different ideas. I think the big thing is we're waiting for guidance as to where our county's at or our region, depending on however the governor decides to make it. But we've been talking about, it's really a brainstorming at this point. We've beat around the ideas of some kind of different blended sessions. We're a 7 through 12 building in Armstrong County. And we talked about maybe junior high days versus senior high days. We've talked about the possibility of online sessions if it's not your day to be in school, to be online that day. The big thing we're concerned about is if social distancing continues. Typically our class sizes are around 25 people. Well, how do you physically socially distance if you have 25 students in a classroom built for maybe 25 or 26? They're not going to be 6 feet from each other. So I think the big thing, again, is just waiting for those guidelines to come out to see what we can do and can't do.
Yeah, so I'll just add to Mike's comments. He raised some, legitimate issues there. And one issue is just the governor's plan about opening counties and regions by the color phases, which are red, yellow, and green. And of course, red is nothing. Yellow is some things can open, but schools cannot, even in yellow. And green, meaning schools could open. We're still not sure whether that color phase will remain all through the summer or whether there'll be a different process that will be put out. And I don't know if you watched the news last night, but Speaker Turzai was on the news saying we need to get kids back to school, in spite of everything else that we're hearing from our health professionals. So I don't know if somebody's going to lobby another plan in place for us for the summer, whether that's going to be the color thing or not. As far as class size, as an organization, we're a little worried about the class size issue. Mike mentioned class sizes of 25. I know sometimes your districts have particular guidelines for class sizes at different levels. However, with the budget crunch that we're all going to feel, and probably with some furloughs and things happening, we're afraid that class sizes may rise for the next school year. And then if you couple that with the social distancing issue, we may have a real problem on our hands going forward. So stay tuned for that. Okay. Somebody else wanted to speak on that one?
No.
All right, next question. I can't read it from here, Steph, so you're gonna have to read it.
Any advice to nonprofits and the CARES Act getting LEAs to be accepting of their nonprofits requesting funds or asking for participation in planning?
All right, so I can speak to that. We're following this one very, very carefully. As you know, as part of the CARES Act and the stimulus and things that were being awarded to the states, and Pennsylvania just put in their application. I don't know whether that was approved yet. It wasn't approved as of yesterday. Certainly the feds are looking at those plans coming forward. We did hear some rumblings, though, that when that money comes out, it's to be distributed like we distribute Title I funds. However, we're also hearing that, that, as you know, if you have non-pubs in your area, that when you distribute Title I funds through your district, you have to count their Title I kids, and they get a piece of the pie, so to speak. Usually it's not a lot of money, and districts do different partnerships with the non-pubs. But what we're hearing lately is that the non-pubs want a bigger share of that piece of the pie, and that all their kids would be counted instead of just their Title I kids. So stay tuned on that issue. That's one that has just surfaced, one that the educational organizations and PDE are dealing with at the present time. So I don't have any more information, just to say that that those funds, once the state application is approved, will be rolled out to the districts. Yet to be seen how much the non-pubs would get as a part of that funding.
The next question is for elementary. Any ideas on kindergarten graduation or 6th grade promotion celebration?
Okay, does anyone want to speak on that one? This is an elementary question. Any ideas for the kindergarten graduation or the 6th grade promotion orientation and those end of the year activities? So we'll wait a minute and see if anybody wants to raise their hand and speak to that one.
Deborah.
All right, we're going to unmute Deborah.
So we do not do a kindergarten graduation, but we are doing a few things for our 5th graders moving to 6th grade. We are doing what a lot of places are doing with like a drive-by celebration. So we've mapped out where all of our 5th graders live, and we're going to just do a drive-by parade for all of those kids, just to acknowledge them. And then our middle school is doing a virtual tour and Zoom session for the incoming 5th graders, with some current 6th graders participating to kind of talk about what middle school is like, and, demonstrate how to open their locks on their locker, which is always a real concern of the 5th graders. How do I get into my locker? So we're trying to emulate what we would typically do in brick and mortar in a virtual fashion.
Thanks, Deborah. Appreciate that. Anyone else want to comment on that topic? Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
Are there any schools that have found their online class instruction effective?
There's a general question. Any schools that have found their general online instruction effective?
Janet?
Janet?
Yeah, I just feel like that the question really is all about learning the technology. I just don't even think it's fair to say, did somebody really get anything approaching what they would have gotten in a regular classroom? This, our teachers weren't even on Google Classroom. they have done a monumental job of getting online. You know, parents have just been whacked with this. And I think, you know, what I see is some great stuff on there, but kids are doing things like, "Hi, Mrs. Jones, how are you? My fish died." So, you know, I don't even know that it's fair to even expect growth from that point of view. We're all living and learning the technology. We've already talked about how these plans are so up in the air, where we're going to have a kid in school on day A and online on day B. That's where it's going to pay off. I don't even know that it's a fair question at this point, even though people have spent a lot of time and energy on it. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Who do we have next? I saw another couple other hands raised. Mike?
Mike.
All right, Mike, we're gonna unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I agree in part with Janet. It's just so different, and we can't expect our students to receive any type of learning of what they would get in the classroom, nor can we expect our teachers to provide one. There's just no way to do that if you're not together with everybody. But we were in a fortunate situation where we have really promoted technology for the past few years. We're a Google school, and all of our teachers were already doing so many things through Google Classroom that I've actually been in a lot of the classes, and I'm a student in all of my teachers' Google Classrooms. And what they are doing is just a fantastic job for the situation that we're in. So I need to stipulate that I do see learning happening, but of course it's not nearly what would happen if we were all together.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
There's one more.
Joe, we're gonna unmute you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have to echo. I have to echo the sentiments of my two colleagues that just spoke, and you know, I think it's as effective as whatever level of support that the kids have at home. You know, you have kids that you can almost expect what to anticipate during regular classroom session, and the work that they're turning in, everything is correct. So, you know, it's like, how do I weigh this information? You know, so it depends on you know, again, the support that they have at home. I also think too that what we're doing now for most of our schools is really learning technology and preparing ourselves for whatever the next step is going to be, because irregardless of how this shapes out, we'll all be in that technology space moving into next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. One of the things I just want to add to that, and I think Mike mentioned learning, you know, is learning is occurring, how much learning is occurring. And this was an interesting thing actually from my wife, who's an elementary principal of an all kindergarten school. And one of the problems their teachers were facing with the online portion is the kindergarten kids sitting there interacting with their teachers, but the parents sitting there as well and answering the questions for the students, and how do you maneuver that part, and telling the parents, you know, you need to back off and let the kids use their brain. So I was just curious whether anyone else was experiencing that problem, and how you handle that with parents being right by their students, their own children's side, and kind of butting in and telling the kids what to answer. Anyone want to comment on that? Joe, go ahead.
So the difficulty in that, in the conversations that we've been having with parents, is that the level of frustration kind of sets in, and then they get the behaviors from the child that they have to manage to get them back on task with learning. So for a lot of our parents, it's easier just to assist them versus allowing them to struggle through trying to figure out what it is that they need to do or how to answer a question.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else want to comment on that? Anything that you found or said to their teachers are saying to people? All right.
Dr. Dill.
Dr. Dill is on. We're going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, I would just like to echo what they said. We're doing the asynchronous learning through Google Classroom, And then our teachers do live Zooms, and that's where we encourage the parents to get on with the students. And our teachers are answering a lot of questions and providing guidance to the parents during those live Zoom sessions.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on to another question.
They have students graduating their IEP goals. How do you handle transcripts for these students? Do you withdraw them from courses for the fourth marking period?
Okay, so this one is about IEP students, and how are you handling the transcripts? Are you withdrawing students from courses for the fourth marking period? Can anyone help with that question?
Janet 4.
Janet 4, we're going to unmute you. Tell us what district you're from.
There we go. I'm from Central Fulton School District. We are not withdrawing students from fourth marking period coursework. I'm the director of student services there. So they are maintaining, their coursework. Again, we're just like everybody else. We are doing things typically through Canvas. That's our platform. We do our Zoom meets and our Google meets with those students. And I would say probably more than anything, it's just due diligence as far as working with the special education teacher or the case manager who's involved with that student. I just literally got off a call regarding one of our seniors, two of our seniors actually, who are in danger of graduating, two special needs students. But there's the thought out there that you can graduate on IEP goals and that type of thing. But we are really we're working with families and students, but we're also holding those students accountable that, with the support of a special education teacher and paraprofessionals, they are, for the most part, our special needs kids are doing what they need to do to meet the requirements of their fourth marking period coursework. And if they're not, we're meeting with them on an individual basis. One of the things that I think has been really helpful that some of our special ed teachers are doing is they are setting up office hours sometimes, and they're doing office hours like one-on-one. So the teacher with one student, and they are working through some of those issues that way. I also can't really emphasize the importance of the paraprofessional support. If you can utilize your paras, ours are phenomenal. They will do, kind of a co-teaching type model, even though they're not teachers, they've become co-teachers. So that's a good way to utilize that as well. But we have not withdrawn any of our special needs students from fourth marking period coursework.
And Janet, while we have you on here, can you talk a little bit about how you're handling IEP meetings as well?
Yep, like I said, I just got off one. We have a senior who is in danger of not graduating, and our graduation day is May 30th, so just like right there. He was on track to graduate, and he's not terribly far behind, but if he doesn't do what he needs to be doing, he's not going to make it. So we actually did a Zoom meeting this morning. Or was it a Google? No, it was a Google Hangout meeting this morning with his teacher of record, his mother, himself, any of the teachers that were involved, his counselor, and that's how we're doing it. And then we do the screen share where we throw up the IEP so that we can look at, like the SDIs and make sure that we're meeting his needs. But we're very transparent in those meetings as far as, what the student needs to do. And they've been productive. I think parents particularly, we've all been through this. If you've been a secondary principal, having those seniors who are in danger of not graduating, that's not a fun place to be this time of year. but then you put the extra layer of them being special needs on top of that and all the legal requirements that go. But yeah, we've been doing our IEP meetings mostly through Google Hangouts, sometimes Zoom, and they've gone very well that way.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, next question, Steph.
They read that Secretary Rivera has applied for a Title I-A funds from the Department of Ed for school districts. A list of allocations by school district was also published. Have any school district decided how to utilize the funds if they become available?
So this gets back to the Title I funds and how they're going to be used. And at a district level, anybody have any administrative talks yet on how those funds will be used when they're doled out to the school districts? That might be too new right now until we get those. Okay, moving on.
Next question, is there any upcoming funding or grants out there for districts who are in dire need of renovation or construction?
Yeah, that's a great question. So renovation and construction, as you know, that whole Plan-Con system hasn't been in place for a number of years because they haven't funded that for school districts. There was actually a commission studying the whole Plan-Con process and recommendations for that, and that's still on hold at this point. I don't specifically know of any particular grants or funding right now for renovation or construction, except applying as you normally would do through that Plan-Con process. My understanding was that in the new process, they were really going to set aside money for those districts and buildings that were safety and health concerns and dealing with those funding situations first for school districts and not new construction. So I don't know if anyone else has any available information on that or another grant funding site. I'm not aware of any. Okay.
The last one is more of a comment. She was in a session where they were told not to do a Zoom tour because it could be used for active shooters to see the layout.
Yes, actually, we had a session on, a couple weeks ago. I think that this was actually mentioned by one of our panelists when they were talking about orientation for new students, coming into a new building, and the idea of doing a Zoom walk of that building as an orientation. And this panelist brought up a really good point, saying, one of the things we might not want to do is to show every single aspect of our building because that could be a threat assessment safety issue. So they were going to do other things, just show a typical classroom, maybe the auditorium and things like that, but not actually do a whole walkthrough like you would do like for a student schedule from start to finish and show every aspect of the building, because of the possibility of other people getting access the layout of a school building. So I don't know, did anyone else talk about that at your district and have plans in place for not doing that or doing that on the other end? Okay, it doesn't look like there's any comments on that one. Was that our last one for today?
That was the last one.
So I just want to say thank you to everyone. Again, as I always say, thank you for the job that you're doing every single day for the students in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. As the Pennsylvania Principals Association, again, we're going to be working on this task force, all through the month of May and early June. And we hope to have a report out to you by mid-June to provide guidance to the field on all the issues that I mentioned previously. So again, thanks for everything that you're doing. And if we can be of any help to you, you know how to find me. Just give us a call or email me directly at Healey@paprincipals.org. Again, thank you, and thank you for joining us this morning. Have a great day.